Welcome to Techstination. Joining us is Simone Davies, author of The Montessori Toddler, A Parent's Guide to Raising a Curious and Responsible Human Being. Thank you for joining us, Simone.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Fred.
Lots to talk about, especially these days when parents are doing so much educating at home, or at least trying to help. But first, give us a little bit of background about yourself and the book.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a Montessori educator. I work with families with children under 4 years old, and I believe that not only Montessori, which some of your listeners may be aware of, is an education system, that those principles don't just need to be used in schools, but can already be applied at home. And it's really useful then for, parents with young toddlers and, children under 4, how they can get cooperation with their child, how they can set up their homes to be more friendly, make them independent, give the child some more control, and then they're happier, basically. How to set up interesting activities for them, and how we can actually find joy in our parenting, and particularly, in their early learning.
Well, describe for us what some of the more simple things are that people might find in your book.
Yeah, so it might just be setting up some Montessori activities. So Montessori is very holistic. It's about a hands-on way of learning. So instead of the adult saying, this is what you need to learn today, instead we're looking at the child and observing them and seeing what they're interested in. So we set up activities that you see that they're interested in. If they're starting to poke things into each other, you think, oh, okay, I'm going to make a posting toy. So it might be like when you post a letter into a letterbox. So they might have then a little slot in a cardboard box where they can put some like a poker chip or that kind of very small object into a hole, and then you'll notice that when they enjoy doing that and they're mastering it, then they can take off the lid, get all of the pieces out, and do it over again. So it's basically looking at your child rather than what's good on Instagram or what you see is an educational toy, and instead seeing what your child's interested in. So it takes a lot of pressure off to buy everything. Instead, you're following your own child, and there's no competition between your child and the neighbor's child, because everyone develops on their own timeline. Like maybe one of us will learn to read earlier and one of us will learn to walk earlier. They're all different, and so it's really nice to take the pressure off parents, I think, as well.
And I've read that not such a great idea maybe to have a room full cluttered with toys kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. We simplify the home space a lot. I think if you go into many homes today, we have too many things, and then the parents are saying, the kids always say that they're bored because actually they can't see anything. Yourself, if you go into a supermarket and there's a whole row of different mueslis, it takes you a lot of time to work out which muesli you like. And when I moved here to the Netherlands, we have very small local stores, and you go in, there's only one or two choices of muesli, and at first you're like, oh, this isn't giving me the variety, but all of a sudden you're like, this is much simpler to choose from. So the same would be with our toys. If you just put out then what your child's interested in, just 6 of the things that they're really focusing on right now. So for a young child, that might just be 5 minutes, but you don't have all those toys. Like sometimes we go in and the child's 18 months old and they still have lots of baby toys, rattles and things like that around, and all the child's going to do with that is throw them. So you find them throwing a lot of toys. So if you remove all of that extra clutter, and it doesn't have to be complicated, they can just have a box like in their living room and put anything in there that you notice they're not really using, and you can store it for another child or you give it to a friend, or even some toys have longevity. When you bring them out then maybe in a few weeks' time, they'll look at them like they're fresh and new again because they haven't been looking at them nonstop.
A lot of parents today seem to be relying more and more on screen time, and I know the Montessori approach doesn't necessarily approve of all that. Tell me what the thinking is.
Yeah, so we do try and keep children as screen-free as possible, particularly under 6 years old, but definitely under 3 years old. And the reason is that, you can do a Montessori app even on an iPad screen, but it's not the same as touching and feeling with your hands. And Dr. Montessori herself, who was an educator at the early 1900s, was, before anything could be measured, she was a scientist and observing just, what she could see in front of her, and noticed how much if you give it to their hand, then it goes straight to the mind. And this is all being backed up by brain research now, that children learn better when they actually are holding concrete materials and then learning it for themselves. And the other thing about Montessori is we're not trying to fill a child with facts. We're basically providing opportunities for them to make discoveries for themselves. And a lot of those are then with their hands. So a screen just doesn't replace that. So then for an elementary age child from 6 to 12 years old, they will start to use technology, but then instead of consuming passively technology, we're looking at ways to use that technology in an active way. So even rather than looking it up, looking up information in Google where they don't really know if information is credible or what they'll even discover in that age, we're using technology to maybe create a beautiful building design on an architectural program. So it's a very conscious use of technology rather than sitting on YouTube and not really knowing what your child's watching. And I understand that parents are busy and they need a babysitter sometimes, but really, like, my children are now 18 and 19, and they weren't iPads to keep them entertained. So when we went to a cafe and we wanted a little bit of time out, we read a book together. Or they started getting a bit agitated, so we'd go outside and we'd watch some vehicles going past, and we're looking at the fire engine, and then the garbage truck goes past. And that's how a child will learn about the world around them, not through a screen.
That said, you've got a great website. Tell us about that.
Useful to reach parents, definitely. No, that's the funny thing is I love working hands-on with the children, and then with parents, my work, I can actually reach parents all around the world via the website, which has been really great. I also have a book, which is nice for parents who prefer to read something in their hands. I have a podcast for parents who prefer to listen on the go, and I'm always making visual resources as well for people who are more visually oriented, and making workshops as well that are very interactive. So just as the child learns in many different ways, so there might be like a visual learner, an oral learner, and those things. I also think about that in terms of how parents take in information as well.
Tell us about some of the things that parents will find on your website, which is the MontessoriNotebook.com.
Yeah, thank you. On the website, one of the favorite things is a 42-page download of activities that are Montessori kind of approved for children under 4 years old. That's always really popular. I also have blog posts on, like, I can't get my child to listen, so I do a lot about Montessori-friendly ways of parenting children. There's also information about how to set up different activities for different age groups. So I have, like, my favorite activities for a 3 to 6 month old right through all the age groups. And then there's lots and lots of beautiful blog posts about ways that Montessori families introduce the ideas in their homes. So you'll see lots of inspiration for setting up your homes in this Montessori way as well, with less clutter.
What are your thoughts about the way parents should be talking to their young children today about all the things that we're facing, whether it's COVID-19, the pandemic, or the protests going on in the streets? Many of them, many people live in the neighborhoods where these things are taking place.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And I always say that we give honest answers to our children, and in an appropriate way, age-appropriate way. So I don't think that a 2-year-old, for example, is starting to get familiar with, like, the hair texture is really interesting. They lean forward. If my hair is different to their hair, they want to explore and see differences. So we don't want to make children colorblind. We want to say, wow, yeah, they have different color skin to us. And so be very aware and highlight how we're different. Because basically in anti-bias education in Montessori, it's a very common phrase to say we're all allowed to be different. So that will be great for race, for gender differences, for, gender, how you perceive yourself and things like that as well. So those are the messages right now under 6 years old that we want to give to our child about acceptance of all different types. And then once you've had a lot of exploration yourself about the own issues that come up around race, then you might be able to start talking to them about why there's injustice and why people are really fighting and processing. And so you might keep it very simple for a younger child. And then the 6 to 12-year-olds are the ones that are going to want to make a difference. They're really interested in the morals and the grays and why are they treated that way and we're treated this way. And you can really teach them to be global citizens in that kind of age group. And for COVID, it's also similar, like age appropriate. Like, why are we washing our hands all the time? And we don't want to frighten them because they might think that they might get nervous. So rather than saying we might get sick, you can say this is to keep us safe. And that they get this message of safety. And then we look to our parent for safety. So when we don't need to wash our hands quite so often, because actually it's really quite nice to get kids out in dirt and not be washing their hands all the time, they'll be able to say, oh, yeah, my mother now says that it's safe not to have to do that. So I think those messages will be really important.
Yeah, and obviously they're noticing that perhaps they haven't been going out to the store with mom or dad and grandparents and cousins that aren't showing up, things like that. They're not seeing them.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. And why are we talking to them online now all the time instead of seeing them in person? Yeah, it breaks your heart, doesn't it? I think it's actually probably the hardest age group because everything changed quite quickly. But what I did find, the families that I've worked with anyway, is the children are really quite flexible and they're spending a lot more time with their parents, so they actually quite enjoy that as well. But the parents, it's a lot of pressure on them because a lot of them are full-time working, and they've had to then adjust their hours so that they're doing more work in the evenings once the children are in bed, or working if they have a partner the night before to really plan and say, who has these meetings on and who's going to be in charge of the children at different times, and then that will really help. And then I know some schools are starting to open up, and so there's a little bit of breath coming back into the schedule of families' lives at the moment.
Tell us what your thinking is about the difference between children who are raised using some of these principles and techniques rather than those who don't have that opportunity or haven't had that opportunity. Sometimes it's a matter of affordability.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that the Montessori approach helps children become curious. They love learning. So instead of like putting up your hand to see if it is in the test, they've learned they want to find out because they're curious about the world around them, those kind of things. They also have a lot of work, not only independently on building their independence, but how you work in groups. So you have indirect lessons on how you care for your friends or how we care for the classroom. So if there's a spill, instead of going, oh no, and the adult cleans it up, we really say, oh, there's a spill. Let's go and find the mop, and we show them how to mop it up. And so they're learning all these skills as well. So you find that children are quite well adjusted and they're easygoing, and even when they can't attend a Montessori school as well, they make a transition quite easily to another system, and they might even find it easier because they don't have to plan what they need to work on that day. So my son had a friend who moved out to an area where there was no Montessori school, and they said, oh, it's easy, the teacher just tells us what to do. So it's much more passive learning. So you see the difference between an active learner, the Montessori way, and a more passive traditional education system. And that said, yes, you're right, you touched on that it's not affordable for everyone, and that's why I find it so important to say, yes, it's not available to everyone, but we can do these things at home. So we can still create curious learners in the home environment. So if your child asks about things, you can say, yeah, let's find out. Let's go and look up books. Let's go and ask in the bakery how they make bread rise. Let's do an experiment ourselves. Let's make our own bread, and again, making them very active as opposed to always making the food for them, putting it in front of them. They're more involved in all the daily life processes as well.
Terrific. Well, the website, once again, is themontessorinotebook.com, and it's MONTESSORI, themontessorinotebook.com. And the book is The Montessori Toddler, A Parent's Guide to Raising a Curious and Responsible Human Being. Simone Davies, thank you for taking the time with us.
Oh, and thank you for your very thoughtful questions. I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks, Fred.
Now this. How many companies out there have continued to innovate when it comes to building a better radio? I'm Fred Fishkin, host of Techstination, and I'm here to tell you about the new CC Skywave SSB radio from the wonderful people at C. Crane. Bob and his crew really love radio, and it shows in this new compact model that is packed with features. Beyond great AM and FM reception and sound, you can tune into shortwave signals from around the world. Listen to ham radio operators, aviation, and more. It's the radio you'll turn to every day and in emergencies. It will run for nearly 3 days on just 2 AA batteries. Pair the sleep timer with the new Soft Speaker 3, and you've got the perfect radio for your nightstand. Of course, it can wake you up too. Click on C. Crane at Techstination.com and put in the code Techstination for a free flashlight with your order. They love radio, and you'll love C. Crane.